Chapter 1. Whispers from the Forgotten House. They say that some houses never forget. They remember the screams, the silence, the blood on the floor that never truly dries, no matter how many times you wash it. There's a little white house in Villisca, Iowa. Charming, small, like something out of a painting. But once you step inside, it breathes, and it remembers. June 10th, 1912. In a town where everyone knew everyone, where church bells rang on time and kids played in the streets until dusk, evil paid a visit, and it didn't knock. Inside that quiet house lived the Moore family, Josiah, Sarah, and their 4 children. That night, 2 young girls, guests of the Moore daughters, came for a sleepover. 8 souls under one roof. And before the sun rose, not one of them would ever leave alive. They were butchered one by one in their sleep, their skulls crushed with the blunt end of an axe, faces covered with cloth as if the killer couldn't bear to see what they'd done, mirrors draped with bedsheets, a plate of food left uneaten in the kitchen, the doors locked from the inside. No one heard a sound, not a scream, not a cry, just silence and blood. When the bodies were discovered the next morning, the town changed forever. Grief turned to panic, panic turned to suspicion, and suspicion turned to silence. The killer was never found. Some say he hid in the attic, watching the family all day. Others believe he walked in from the shadows and vanished just as easily. But one thing's for certain, something stayed behind. More than a century later, the house still stands, untouched, preserved, as if waiting for someone to remember, to listen, to hear the whispers. And recently, someone did. A group of amateur paranormal investigators, 3 suburban mothers with a taste for thrill and tragedy, decided to spend the night inside the Villisca house. They thought they were chasing ghosts, but what they found was something much darker. And now, it wants to be heard again. Chapter 2. Blood on the Pillows, an Axe in the Dark. The summer air in Villisca that night was still. No storms, no visitors, just a calm that draped over the town like a lullaby. Inside the Moore house, laughter echoed earlier that evening. The children had just returned from a Children's Day program at church, singing, playing, glowing in innocence. Lena and Ina Stillinger, the overnight guests, shared giggles with the Moore kids upstairs before drifting off to sleep. But by dawn, their laughter would become the last joyful sound that home would ever hear. The killer entered or perhaps revealed himself sometime after midnight. No signs of forced entry, no smashed window, no broken lock, which leads many to believe he was already inside, hiding in the attic crawl space, waiting, listening, breathing in rhythm with the family below him. He moved first to Josiah and Sarah's room. The axe came down, over and over, crushing skull and bone, rendering screams into silence. Josiah was struck so violently his face was unrecognizable. His wife, slain beside him, her body limp, head fractured. The murderer didn't stop there. He walked down the hallway, into the children's room. 4 kids, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, asleep, dreaming, and then nothing. One after the other bludgeoned in their beds, soft pillows soaked in blood. The weapon, Josiah's own axe, taken from the backyard shed. Finally, he entered the guest room. Lena and Ina Stillinger, 2 little girls who had asked their parents for just one night away. Lena may have woken up. Her body was found in a strange position, arms up, a defensive wound across her arm. Some reports suggest she was moved after death. There were whispers of a torn nightgown, a suggestion of something far more depraved. But it's what the killer did next that chilled even the most hardened investigators. He covered every mirror in the house with sheets, draped clothes over windows, placed pieces of cooked bacon on the floor near the bodies, laid a slab of raw meat on the dining room table, wiped the axe clean, and left it beside a wall. Then he vanished. No one saw anything. No neighbors heard a scream. No dogs barked. The house that night was a sealed coffin of horror. The next morning, a neighbor grew suspicious. The Moores hadn't come outside. No one answered the door. A call was made, and soon, the town's marshal walked into the house and into history. The scene was so brutal that one officer stepped outside to vomit. The children's small bodies, still in bed, soaked in a red so deep it had turned black. The smell of death. Of something worse than death. Word spread fast. Reporters swarmed the home, some even taking souvenirs, pieces of clothing, scraps of bedding before police could even secure the scene. The crime scene was contaminated. The investigation? A disaster. Suspects were named, a local reverend, a traveling worker, even a state senator. But nothing stuck. No arrests, no confession, no closure. And while the town buried its dead, the house itself waited. They tried to rent it out. People moved in. People moved out, fast. They reported voices, cold drafts, the sound of footsteps in the attic when no one was upstairs. No one stayed long. Eventually, the house was left empty, a forgotten tomb in the middle of Main Street. Until someone decided to open it to the public. A haunted attraction, a museum of murder. People laughed at first, until the laughter stopped, because strange things started happening. People collapsing on tours, cameras refusing to work inside. One man claimed he was scratched down his back while standing alone in the children's bedroom. And then there were the whispers. Always the whispers. Visitors reported hearing children calling out for help. Footsteps at 2 a.m., lights flickering, batteries drained instantly, and then that voice. The one that says, "Mommy, are you mad?" was recorded. It was real, and it was only the beginning. Because one night, over 100 years after the murders, 3 women walked into that house with cameras and curiosity. They thought they were prepared. They were wrong. Chapter 3, the first night. Something woke up. They called themselves the Spirit Sisters. 3 women in their late 30s, moms by day, ghost hunters by night. Emily, sharp-tongued and skeptical. Rachel, gentle, sensitive to energy. And Tara, the one who always seemed to feel things before they happened. They had been investigating so-called haunted places across Iowa for months, filming short videos for their YouTube channel. It was a fun hobby, until the Villisca Axe murder house. From the moment they pulled up to the property, Tara said her stomach turned. "I don't like the windows," she whispered. "They look like they're watching us." Rachel laughed it off, trying to keep things light. Emily rolled her eyes, but none of them could explain why the air grew colder the moment they stepped through the front door, despite it being mid-July. The house was small, creaky. Every footstep echoed. As they walked through the rooms, they whispered to their cameras, recording everything. Emily stood in the parents' bedroom, staring at the dented wall above the bed, where Josiah had been struck so violently, his blood stained the ceiling. "This is just history," she said confidently. "Stone doesn't hold memories. Wood doesn't remember pain." But Rachel was frozen in the hallway. "I hear breathing," she whispered. "There's someone upstairs." They paused the recording. Listened. Silence, then a soft thump. From the attic, Tara's voice cracked. That was not the wind. They climbed the narrow steps into the children's bedroom. Cold. So cold. One of their cameras shut off. Batteries fully drained. Emily tried to laugh. "Cheap tech," she muttered. Then came the whisper. It was faint. Raspy. A child's voice. "Why won't you help us?" Tara dropped her recorder. "No one said that," Rachel insisted. "None of us." They played the tape back. "Why won't you help us?" They moved to the attic. Dusty, cramped, nothing but old boards and shadows. That's when Tara screamed. On the wall, someone had drawn in black marker recently. A name. Lena, the name of one of the Stillinger girls. No tours had run that week. No one else had keys to the house. Emily finally looked shaken. They decided to perform a spirit box session in the living room. Static filled the air. Then, "Get out!" All 3 women jumped. The voice was male, aggressive, full of something ancient and wrong. Then a crash upstairs, like furniture being thrown. They ran up. Nothing had moved. And yet Rachel clutched her arm. Scratch marks, fresh, red, like claws. Tara said it first. "We woke something up." They debated leaving, but they had committed to spending the entire night. Rachel refused to sleep. She sat in the hallway outside the children's room, holding a cross. Tara tried to pray, but every time she closed her eyes, she said she heard giggling, but not the kind children make when they're happy. This laughter was hollow, twisted, and wet. Emily, despite her skepticism, whispered into the camera, "I don't think we're alone. I don't think we've ever been alone in this house." At exactly 3:12 a.m., all 3 of them heard it. A heavy breath, just behind them, and then the sound of the axe dragging across the floor. Chapter 4, The House Marks You. By sunrise, they thought they'd made it through the worst. But what none of them understood yet was this. In the Villisca house, survival is not the end. It's the beginning of being marked. Rachel was the first to notice the change. Back home, 2 days after they left the house, she started having dreams. Always the same. A hallway bathed in moonlight, the sound of a child sobbing behind a locked door, and something breathing, slow, deliberate, just inches from her neck. She tried ignoring it, told herself it was just residual fear. Trauma, maybe. But then her daughter woke up crying in the middle of the night. "Mommy," she said, "why was that boy standing in my room?" Rachel froze. "What boy?" Her daughter pointed to the corner, the one with no eyes. At the same time, Tara was experiencing her own haunting. At work, computers shut off when she walked into the room. Her phone dialed random numbers by itself at 3:12 a.m. One night, while brushing her teeth, she looked up into the mirror and saw a girl barefoot, in a torn white nightgown, standing behind her. When she turned around, the room was empty, but the mirror was fogged up with handprints, child-sized. Tara started sleeping with the lights on. Emily, though, denied everything. "We imagined it," she insisted. Ghosts don't follow you home. But she couldn't explain the nosebleeds, or the bruises forming on her thighs in perfect symmetrical lines, or why she started waking up with dried dirt under her fingernails. And then came the dream. In it, she was standing in the attic again. alone. Something moved behind her. Slow, wet. She couldn't turn around, couldn't scream. And then a whisper right against her ear, "You laughed at us." She jolted awake, her heart racing, and on the ceiling above her bed were those 3 words, smeared in something reddish-brown, "You brought it." That same day, Tara visited a priest. Not even Catholic, but desperate. She didn't even say where she had been. The priest looked at her for a long moment, then asked softly, "What happened in that house?" Tara cried. He performed a cleansing prayer, blessed her with holy water, told her she may have encountered something more than a ghost. Some houses, he said, aren't haunted by spirits. They're wounded, and wounds can get infected. Rachel, meanwhile, began documenting everything. Photos of handprints, audio recordings of whispers at night. But when she tried uploading them to their channel, the files become corrupted, one by one, until her entire hard drive was wiped. And then she found something that hadn't been there before. A note, slipped under her pillow, handwritten, childish, "Play with us again." She moved out of her house the next day. They stopped filming, took the channel down. No more spirit hunting. No more overnight investigations. They tried to pretend the Villisca house was a one-time nightmare, but the house remembered them. 2 months later, a journalist who had interviewed them for a paranormal blog was found dead, heart attack, at 31. His notes were never recovered. But the last message he sent to Emily said only, "That house is watching me." And then came the final straw. Tara disappeared. She had told Rachel the night before that she was going to try a solo session, to go back to the house one more time, to finish what they started, to apologize. She never came home. Police searched the Villisca house. It was locked from the outside. No signs of anyone inside. But in the attic, they found her phone, cracked, still recording. The final seconds were never released to the public. But Rachel, who was allowed to listen, said there was one sound that played before the feed went silent. The unmistakable squelch of metal slicing into flesh, and a child's voice saying, "Now you stay forever." Tara was never found, and since then no one spent the night in the Villisca Axe murder house without reporting something strange. Some say the house is a doorway, others a mouth that feeds. But one thing is certain, it doesn't forget you, and it doesn't let go. Chapter 5. 6 Spirits and the Man in the Hat. The house was never supposed to be sacred. It was wood and nails, dust and plaster. But something somewhere along the line decided to move in. And it wasn't alone. Paranormal investigators, mediums, and clergy who've dared enter the Villisca Axe murder house agree on one thing. There are multiple spirits inside. But they don't all belong to the victims. The children who were brutally murdered seem to linger. Some say they're trapped. Others say they're not children at all anymore. One psychic described it like this. They come to you in the form of scared little girls. But if you let them in, if you speak to them, they change. Their voices deepen. Their eyes go black, and they smile like they've been dead for centuries. Visitors report toys moving on their own in the children's room. A ball that rolls back against gravity. Dolls that blink. A closet door that slams shut if you say the name Lena. Rachel, one of the spirit sisters, once said, "It's like the house wants you to feel sorry for them, and then it uses that." But the most terrifying figure in the house isn't a child. He's a shadow, a presence, known only as the Man in the Hat. Some say he's the murderer. Others believe he's something much older, something that existed before the 1912 killings and used the violence to anchor itself. He appears in corners, in mirrors, in flashes of static. Eyewitnesses describe a tall figure in a wide-brimmed black hat, no face, sometimes glowing eyes, sometimes just a void. He doesn't speak, he watches, and when he appears, the house goes still. Dogs outside fall silent, air thickens, EMF readers spike, batteries die. An exorcist from Missouri once spent an hour inside the house alone. He claimed the Man in the Hat followed him room to room but never entered the attic. "He doesn't go up there," the priest said. "He doesn't have to. That's where the blood sleeps." But perhaps the most horrifying part, there are reports of people seeing the Man in the Hat weeks after leaving Villisca. He shows up in dreams, in reflections, in photos they never took. One woman said he stood at the edge of her bed every night for 7 days whispering one word over and over, "Confess." Confess what? No one knows. But theories abound. Some believe the 6 spirits are not just the victims, but also echoes of those who've died because of the house. Like echoes of pain and trauma that get reabsorbed into the structure, becoming part of the haunting. Others believe the Man in the Hat is a demonic entity, drawn to the original crime scene by the overwhelming evil, and once inside, he never left. A few even claim there's a 7th presence, one that can't be named, only felt. A primal coldness in the basement. A breathless pressure behind the attic door. Some say it's the true evil. The others, just puppets. A retired medium once said, "Everyone focuses on the axe, but the axe was just a tool. Something was behind it, and it's still there." Whether it's a trauma imprint, restless spirits, or something darker, there is one fact no one can deny. Every person who has stayed a night in the Villisca house has left differently. Some come back with scars, some with stories, and some don't come back at all. Chapter 6. The First Exorcism, Crossing the Line. They arrived just after sundown. The group stood in silence outside the Villisca house, the paint chipped and gray under the dying light. It didn't look haunted, it looked tired. But that's the thing about evil, it doesn't always show its teeth. Leading the team was Father Thomas Doyle, a man hardened by years of dealing with what the church calls persistent malevolent infestation. His hair was gray, his eyes darker. Some said he had been inside homes that bled through the walls. Others whispered he had failed, once. With him, Dr. Karen McNeil, a trauma psychologist from Des Moines who specialized in post-possession delusions. Eli Harper, local historian and skeptic. Maria Evans, a psychic medium who once claimed a spirit, followed her home from the house and stood over her bed for 12 nights. She had vowed never to return. But now, here she was, gripping her rosary like it might break in her hand. Before entering, Maria made one request. Seal the attic. Nail it shut if you have to. If it gets out during the rite, we don't walk out. They stepped inside. The house was still. Too still. No breeze. No distant creak of old wood. Even the wind outside seemed to die once the front door closed. Father Doyle began to work immediately, opening his black leather satchel and lighting a small censer. Frankincense filled the air. The prayers began, ancient Latin phrases spilling into the darkness like sacred smoke. Exorcizo te omni spiritus immundi, in nomine Dei Patris Omnipotentis. The words echoed unnaturally. The first 15 minutes were calm, but when they reached the children's bedroom, everything changed. The EMF meter in Dr. McNeil's hand spiked violently, jumping from green to red in seconds. Maria dropped to her knees. "They're here," she whispered. "They're watching us from the corners." In the far corner of the room, a small ball rolled slowly, and then reversed direction. Against gravity, against logic. The lights flickered. A cold rush swept through the room. "Someone's whispering," Eli said. I heard my name, but no one had spoken. Father Doyle pressed on, now louder, more forceful. "In nomine Iesu Christi, impero tibi, desede spiritus immundi." In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you, depart, unclean spirit. They moved room to room. The tension in the air grew thick, like walking through fog. In the kitchen, the cupboard doors opened simultaneously. In the bathroom, the mirror cracked from the inside. But the attic, that's where everything went wrong. Despite Maria's warning, Father Doyle insisted the rite must be completed in every room, even there. The moment the attic door creaked open, the house groaned. A low, guttural moan as if the very frame of the building resented them. They climbed slowly, flashlights in hand. The moment they stepped inside, the air changed. It was freezing. Their breaths puffed in front of them. "It's darker in here," Eli said. "I can't see the back wall." But they were only a few steps in. The attic wasn't that big. Father Doyle continued the prayers. The crucifix in his hand began to vibrate and shake violently. Then came the scream. Maria dropped to the floor, clutching her head. "Stop it! It's in my mind to get it out!" Then the attic door slammed shut behind them. The flashlight beams danced wildly, and then, all at once, total darkness. Every device failed. Phones died. The EMF meter shattered from impact. Then, a voice. Low. Ancient. Not human. "You don't belong here, priest." And then another voice. High-pitched, distorted, childlike. "We told you to leave." Father Doyle raised his voice, now shaking. "I command you, through Christ who has conquered death, show yourself." From the far corner, something moved. A figure. Tall. Too tall. Wearing a wide-brimmed hat. Limbs that bent the wrong way. Its face, if there was one, was a void. A distortion in reality itself. Dr. McNeil screamed and dropped her notes. Eli staggered backward and hit the wall. Maria's rosary beads snapped in her hands, beads scattering across the floor like bones. Father Doyle tried to finish the prayer, but the words came out wrong. His Latin slurred, then broke into gasps. He dropped to one knee. The attic seemed to pulse. The walls breathed, then silence. And the attic door creaked open on its own. They fled. On the front lawn, Eli vomited. Dr. McNeil was crying. Maria was silent, her eyes locked on something no one else could see. Father Doyle stared back at the house. His hands trembled. "That thing," he whispered, "it's not of this world. That place isn't haunted. It's true." The exorcism had failed, and afterward, the house changed. Locals began calling it hot. The air inside was heavier. Paranormal activity became more frequent and more aggressive. One man suffered a stroke 3 days after visiting. A teenager was scratched across the back in his sleep. A ghost hunter went missing for 14 hours, then was found in a nearby cornfield, unable to speak. No one attempted another exorcism. No one dared. From that point on, The Villisca Axe murder house was no longer considered just haunted. It was something worse. It had become a mouth, and it was hungry. Chapter 7. 67 Years of Silence, and the Pattern that Broke it. After the exorcism attempt failed, the Villisca Axe murder house seemed to retreat into a long, dark sleep. For decades, 67 years, to be exact, there were no major incidents reported. No screams in the night, no flashing lights or moving objects, just silence. But silence in a place like that is never peaceful. Local townspeople whispered that the house was like a closed tomb, sealed off not only by wood and nails, but by an unseen force no one dared to challenge. Stories faded into the realm of rumor, and eventually, the house was largely forgotten, just an old relic with a grisly past. That was until the early 2000s when something began to stir again. It started with the Thompsons, a young family who moved in quietly, hoping for a fresh start. They were unaware of the house's true history, only the occasional old newspaper clipping about the axe murders that they thought was decades-old news. But from their first night, things were off. The children, 8-year-old Emily and 6-year-old Jacob, began complaining about a man in a black hat watching them from the shadows. "He stands by the window," Emily told her mother, "but when I look, he disappears." Jacob started waking up screaming every night, pointing at the ceiling, saying, "He's coming down to get me." Mrs. Thompson dismissed the stories as childish nightmares until she found deep gouges scratched into the walls of their bedroom. Scratch marks, unlike anything a child could make. More alarming were the bloody footprints that appeared on the living room floor one morning. They seemed to trail from the attic stairs. But when the family went to investigate, the footprints vanished as if swallowed by the floorboards. Unexplainable cold spots grew colder, making breathing difficult in certain parts of the house. Neighbors reported hearing loud banging noises, like something heavy being dropped repeatedly. When the Thompsons called a local priest for a blessing, even he refused to enter. "I won't cross that threshold without backup," he said grimly. Word spread quickly, and the house once again became the epicenter of fear. A local paranormal investigator, Mark Benson, took an interest. Mark had studied the house for years, but had never dared to spend a full night inside until the Thompsons' ordeal pushed him over the edge. On his first visit, his equipment malfunctioned. Cameras stopped recording. His voice recorder caught whispers in a language no one could identify. Over the next several months, Mark documented strange phenomena. Sudden drops in temperature that made his breath visible inside the house even during summer. Apparitions of a faceless man in a black hat, appearing and disappearing at will. Objects moving without cause. Electrical interference that would knock out power in the entire neighborhood for minutes at a time. More disturbing was a pattern Mark discovered. He found old, hidden writings scratched into the attic floor, symbols that matched occult markings used in early 20th century dark rituals. Research showed that the Villisca house had been built on what was once believed to be a Native American burial ground, a fact locals avoided mentioning. Mark theorized that the evil presence wasn't just the spirits of the murdered family, but something far older, something awakened by the violent deaths and the failed exorcism years earlier. The house had become a gateway, a dark nexus where pain, death, and supernatural forces converged. The longer Mark stayed inside, the more his health deteriorated. He began suffering from unexplained bruises that appeared overnight, nightmares so vivid they felt like memories, a growing paranoia that someone or something was watching his every move. Eventually, Mark refused to return, warning others to stay far away. Yet, despite the warnings, every year, thrill seekers, ghost hunters, and the curious tried their luck. Many returned shaken, some vanished without a trace. The house's legend grew darker. It was no longer just the scene of a gruesome massacre. It was a place where time and reality warped, where the boundary between life and death thinned dangerously. And the presence inside? It was waiting for the next victim. Chapter 8. The Awakening, When the Darkness Spreads. The years following Mark Benson's retreat from the Villisca Axe murder house marked the beginning of what locals now call the Awakening, a surge in paranormal activity so intense that the small town was shaken to its core. It started subtly at first. Neighbors reported strange sightings, shadowy figures lurking near windows, distant screams echoing through the night, and pets refusing to enter the property, growling ferociously at invisible threats. One elderly woman, Mrs. Agnes Carter, who lived directly across the street, claimed that every night at precisely 3:13 a.m., she saw a faint, flickering light coming from the attic window. She described the light as cold, like the glow of a dying star. More disturbingly, she said she could hear whispers, not human voices, but guttural, unnatural sounds that seemed to seep through the walls. The town's police department reluctantly opened a case after multiple break-ins were reported at the property. No valuables were stolen, But the break-ins always ended with the intruders fleeing in terror, screaming about something that wasn't alive chasing them. Among those who dared to enter was Jake Hollister, a paranormal investigator and YouTube content creator hungry for a story that would skyrocket his channel. Jake's first night inside the house was live-streamed and watched by thousands. Initially, the night was uneventful, but at 2:47 a.m. his camera began to glitch. Suddenly, his voice trembled. "Guys, I don't know what that was, but something just brushed past me. It was cold, like ice, and I swear I saw a figure in the corner." Minutes later, the feed cut abruptly with a loud thud. The camera was found the next day, shattered near the back porch. Jake was never seen again. His disappearance sparked a wave of fear and fascination. Soon after, reports surfaced of people who had been near the house suffering from unexplainable injuries, deep scratches across their backs, broken bones without cause, and a growing sense of being watched. Local legends began to merge with new tales of a black-hatted figure who could warp reality, drag victims into shadowy realms, and feed on their fear. In the following months, paranormal groups from across the country arrived to investigate. One team, armed with state-of-the-art equipment, recorded terrifying evidence. Voices speaking in unknown languages, sometimes chanting, sometimes pleading. Sudden temperature drops below freezing, even in midsummer. Apparitions of children laughing eerily before vanishing. A video captured what looked like a hand twisted and malformed emerging from the attic wall, only to dissolve into mist. But with every investigation, the house seemed to grow stronger, its malevolent energy feeding off the intrusions. Several investigators reported experiencing visions of the original murders. They saw the axe-wielding killer stalking the house, heard the desperate cries of the victims, and felt the overwhelming sorrow and rage that had been embedded into the walls. One paranormal researcher, Dr. Lena Foster, wrote in her journal, "This house is a wound, a tear in the fabric of reality where past and present collide. We are not just facing restless spirits, but a force that transcends death itself." Local authorities, overwhelmed and fearing for public safety, finally declared the property off-limits. Yet despite the warnings and the fence around the property, trespassers kept coming, drawn by morbid curiosity or darker impulses. And with each trespass, the darkness spread. People who lived nearby reported strange occurrences, objects moving on their own, shadows darting in peripheral vision, and an oppressive feeling of dread that settled like a storm cloud over the neighborhood. The once quiet town became a place of whispered fears and sleepless nights. The Villisca Axe murder house had awakened, and now its hunger was insatiable. Chapter 9. The Aftermath and the Court Trial. As the darkness inside the Villisca Axe murder house grew more aggressive, the community's fear turned to desperation. The house had become a symbol of terror, a scar on the town's conscience that no one wanted to face but everyone feared to ignore. After multiple disappearances, injuries, and inexplicable events linked to the house, the local government finally decided to act. The city council filed a lawsuit to seize the property on grounds of public safety. They wanted to demolish the house and erase its horrific legacy once and for all. But the owner at the time, a reclusive man named Harold Briggs, refused to sell or abandon the property. Harold was an enigmatic figure. Some said he was drawn to the house's darkness, others believed he was trying to contain it. The court trial became a media spectacle, attracting attention from paranormal enthusiasts, skeptics, and the general public alike. During the trial, testimonies poured in. Witnesses spoke of ghostly sightings, violent poltergeist activity, and personal tragedies linked to the house. Harold's attorney argued that the house was private property and that any paranormal claims were unsubstantiated and should not affect ownership rights. But the prosecution brought in expert witnesses, including Dr. Lena Foster, the paranormal researcher who had studied the house extensively. Dr. Foster's testimony was chilling. She described the house as a supernatural hazard, a nexus of evil energy that posed a real threat to anyone nearby. She showed photographs and recordings capturing strange lights, unexplained shadows, and voices caught on audio devices. The defense tried to discredit the evidence as fabrications or optical illusions, but the court remained unconvinced. Amid the proceedings, strange incidents continued. Court officials reported flickering lights and cold drafts in the courthouse, and Harold claimed he heard whispers calling his name during the hearings. The trial dragged on for months, but eventually, the judge ruled in favor of the city, ordering the house to be condemned and scheduled for demolition. However, before demolition could begin, a sudden and mysterious fire broke out, engulfing the house in flames. The fire was so intense that it destroyed much of the structure within hours. Investigation revealed no clear cause for the blaze, no evidence of arson, no electrical faults, just an inexplicable inferno that seemed to consume the evil within. Though the house was mostly destroyed, reports of hauntings and paranormal activity persisted in the surrounding area. Many believe that the dark energy was never fully contained or destroyed, only released to roam free. To this day, the land where the Villisca Axe murder house once stood remains vacant, untouched, and avoided by locals. The town has tried to move on, but the shadow of that horrific night in 1912 and the dark events that followed continue to haunt its streets and its people. For those who dare to remember, the Villisca Axe murder house is a grim reminder that some evils never truly die. They only wait in the darkness, hungry for the next soul. Chapter 10. Legacy and Warnings. What the Villisca House Teaches Us. The Villisca Axe murder house may have been reduced to ashes, but its story refuses to fade away. For over a century, it has been a symbol of unspeakable horror, a nexus where human violence and supernatural darkness intertwine, reminding us that some evils are far deeper than flesh and blood. After the fire, many expected the hauntings to cease, but the truth is far more unsettling. Reports continue to emerge from locals and visitors alike describing strange noises echoing on still nights, unseen hands brushing against their skin, sudden chills that freeze the blood in their veins, shadowy figures glimpsed from the corner of the eye. Many paranormal experts warn that the house's evil was never destroyed, only displaced, its malevolent force now free to seep into the surrounding land and minds. But what is the lesson here? Why does this tragedy still grip our imaginations and our deepest fears? Some say it's a warning about the consequences of unchecked violence and the darkness we bury within ourselves. Others believe it's a testament to the thin veil between our world and something far darker lurking beyond. Whatever the truth, the Villisca Axe murder house teaches us this. There are places touched by darkness so profound that normal laws no longer apply. Places where pain, rage, and death echo eternally. Places where the past is never truly past and the present is forever haunted. For those who feel drawn to the macabre, the thrill of exploring such sites must be tempered by respect and caution. Curiosity can invite danger when we cross into realms we do not understand. Today, the land where the house stood is fenced off and under quiet watch, but the stories live on in whispered conversations, ghost tours, and chilling legends told around campfires. The Villisca Axe murder house is more than a story of a grisly crime. It is a chilling reminder of how darkness can linger long after the last scream fades. It warns us that some doors once opened can never be closed, and some evil, once unleashed, never truly sleeps. As we end this journey into one of America's most haunted places, remember this: respect the past, fear the shadows, and above all, beware what waits in the silence of the night. Thank you for joining me on this dark journey into the shadows of the Villisca Axe murder house. If this story sent chills down your spine and left you wondering what lurks just beyond the veil of our reality, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell, because here, the darkest secrets are just waiting to be uncovered. Have you ever felt something watching you when you were alone? Or experienced something you couldn't explain? Share your stories in the comments. Let's see who's brave enough to confront the unknown. Remember, some doors once opened can never be closed. So tread carefully and beware the shadows, because you never know what's waiting in the silence. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and above all, stay alive.